Welcome back, everyone. It's Peter Tragos, the lawyer you know, and today we're going to give a quick update on the 3 other officers involved in George Floyd's death as their federal trial has come to a close and has gone to the jury. The jury is currently deliberating against Officers Tao, Kang, and Lane, who were all accused of depriving George Floyd of his rights and basically not intervening and helping him and protecting him from Derek Chauvin and providing life-saving action like CPR or doing something to protect him in that situation. We're going to talk about what happened through that trial, very interesting points, and whether or not we think convictions should come down for 1, 2, or all 3 of these officers. So if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please take a second, go and subscribe so you can follow all the cases with us and let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy this case, make sure you hit the like button. Okay, so something that was kind of unusual in this case, but that we predicted from the beginning once we knew Thomas Lane, one of the defendants, one of the officers, was going to testify because his lawyer made it very clear in opening statements we were going to hear from him. We predicted that all 3 would then have to testify, and that is what happened. So the language in the charges, which was explained in depth in closing arguments, especially by the defense, was that the officers willfully deprived George Floyd of his constitutional rights, which means that they acted with a bad purpose or improper motive to disobey or disregard the law. Okay, and that's really important when we talk about the testimony of these 3 officers. First, we'll talk about Officer Lane. Officer Lane was a rookie, not a lot of time on the job, was listening to Derek Chauvin, and made plenty of comments about trying to protect and care for George Floyd. Now, he didn't throw Derek Chauvin off of him. He didn't overrule Derek Chauvin. He didn't call a supervisor to come in and fix what Derek Chauvin did. But he went through a lot of his decision-making and how he thought George Floyd was breathing because he saw his chest going up and down. He thought his, I believe, blood pressure was fine because he saw the veins in his arms. He knew that George Floyd was talking, so if you're talking, you must be breathing. He thought that doing some other maneuver where they chain the legs to the hands was too excessive for what was happening to George Floyd, and they didn't think that was necessary. That would have been too bad to George Floyd. So he was thinking about him and trying to do the right thing and not a more excessive show of force than was needed for George Floyd. But he also knew that George Floyd was unpredictable, and he fought his way out of the squad car and had kind of created problems for them already, so he didn't want to go too far in not restraining George Floyd. He also made comments that they should lift him up on his side. And the first time he realized, he says in his testimony, that there was an actual physical problem with George Floyd is when he saw his face when he was put on the stretcher, and he immediately tried starting with CPR, doing chest compressions, helping in any way that he could to try to help George Floyd. So I think Officer Lane, as I've said throughout this entire case, has the best chance at a not guilty verdict. I actually think I would probably lean not guilty for Officer Lane. Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments by putting Lane and then guilty or not guilty next to his name. Next, let's move to Officer Kang, who is potentially the most culpable as he was also on top of George Floyd and kind of in the action. So his theory of defense and his story is that he was also a rookie and inexperienced. But the main defense for him was he looked up to Derek Chauvin. Derek Chauvin trained Officer Kang, and he was following Derek Chauvin's orders. His lawyer argued, and through his testimony, that he was not trained adequately. Not that he was untrained, but just that he was not trained adequately on how to intervene in this situation, what to do, what the right course of action was, and therefore he had no opportunity to do anything different than what he did. But in my opinion, so based on Kang's actions or inaction and following suit for Derek Chauvin and following what Derek Chauvin said and did, I actually think he is going to come back with the jury is going to come back with a guilty verdict for him. Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments by putting Kang and guilty or not guilty. Lastly is Officer Tao. His main defense was that he was relying on the other officers to do their job and handle George Floyd appropriately while he was on crowd control. Now, the prosecutors had some cross-examination and arguments about his inaction and about how he was more experienced, about how he came with Chauvin and he should have known better. He should have stepped to Chauvin because he wasn't a rookie. He had a little bit more authority than the other two officers and he did nothing, therefore willfully depriving George Floyd of his civil rights. I think based on Tao's actions and the fact that he was doing a lot of crowd control for these crimes specifically, I would lean not guilty. I don't feel like the government proved beyond a reasonable doubt his guilt of these crimes charged. So that's the way I would lean for Officer Tao, which would mean if I was a juror, I would have 1 guilty officer and 2 not guilty based on these federal charges of deprivation of civil rights for George Floyd. But once again, let me know what you think in the comments for Officer Tao, guilty or not guilty with Tao's names, because I would love to hear what you potential jurors think about this case, knowing what the officers' defenses were. They all testified. They told the jury why they made the decisions that they made. So we'll see what happens in these federal cases with these federal charges now that are at trial, because they still all have pending state charges for aiding and abetting a murderer, Derek Chauvin, for the murder of George Floyd. We'll see if these verdicts have any effect on those state cases, if the state dismisses them, maybe if they're not guilty in the federal cases, if they plead to the state cases, if they're guilty in the federal cases. We'll see if there's any impact based on what the jury's verdict is on these federal charges. But for now, we're going to continue following until we have a verdict in this case, and then we will discuss it together, maybe at a live, so I can answer your questions. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this update. Hopefully you learned something. Let me know your thoughts in the comments and like the video on the way out. Thanks for watching this episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you like this content, please share it with your friends. Make sure you subscribe to our page and like our videos. If you want some interaction, get in the comments and we'll be sure to get back to you. If you want to know any more information about our firm or this page, you can find out in the description or visit tragoslaw.com. We post multiple times throughout the week, so make sure you hit that bell so you can get the notification and not miss out on the next episode.